Okay, so we are in the very beginning of Sha'ar Hayichud ve'Emunah, the second book of Tanya. We began the introduction. We're still in the middle of the introduction. Let me go through a little bit of overview of the first part of the introduction, so everything will make sense. So first of all, this second book of Tanya is is very different than the first book of Tanya in the sense that the entire first book of Tanya, the 53 chapters that we learn, is really the Alter Rebbe giving us a systematic method in Avodas Hashem, in ultimately becoming the Beinoni, which is reaching our highest spiritual potential. And to put it in a nutshell, the if I could just put it encapsulate the 53 chapters into sort of one or two sentences, basically the Alter Rebbe's thesis is that through the power of our intellect, through the power of our mind, through investing time and effort in intellectually comprehending concepts in godliness, particularly concepts in Chassidus, the godless Hashem, the Avos Hashem that Hashem has to us, etc. Contemplating on the Alter Rebbe gives us various meditations contemplating on all of the Chesed that Hashem has done for us. Throughout the chapters 40s, the Alter Rebbe gives us actually very specific meditations. So through that meditative work, I will then create an emotional attachment to Hashem, whether it's an emotional feeling of Avos Hashem or an emotional feeling of Yiras Hashem, but the emotions are derived from the intellect. And then when I am feeling, or at the lowest level, at least intellectually understanding that Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem is positive and is good for me and is the path that I want to be on, or even more, when I can actually develop those emotions through my intellectual work, then I invest that Ava and Yira in the mitzvahs that I do, in the davening that I do, in the Torah that I do, and I live with that Ava and Yira. And that Ava and Yira is what empowers my behavior control. It's what allows me to override a very strong, natural, innate force within me, which the Alter Rebbe calls the Nefesh Bahamas, i.e., our nature. And so in order to transcend our nature, in order to override our nature, this is through the power of the emotions that are derived from the intellect. And there's and the Alter Rebbe gives a whole systematic method on what to meditate upon, on how to create these emotions, on how to invest them in our mitzvahs, etc. And that's the 53 chapters of Tanya. And the bottom line there is ultimately striving to become the Beinoni, which is really behavior control. The Beinoni means that my thoughts, my speech, and my action are in the domain of my godly soul. So that while I still may have some inner ugliness within me, ugly cravings, the negative aspects of my nature, whatever it may be, through that intellectual work, through that the emotions that are created, I never allow that negativity to manifest itself. I never allow it outwards. I'm able to subdue it continually and constantly. Behavior control, i.e., the Beinoni. This sefer, so that's the first book of Tanya. So it really is about our own Avodas Hashem and the path on how to achieve those levels. However, all of that presupposes a certain knowledge. In other words, I can't intellectually meditate on concepts unless I learn about those concepts, unless I understand. In other words, the foundation of it all, the foundation of the Alter Rebbe's entire path is our understanding, our emunah in the concepts that we're learning. So without learning, without having a firm grasp on on what our emuna is, on what we believe Hashem is, it's almost impossible to go further. So that's why we mentioned the second book of Tanya was actually there's a thought, and it's a thought that makes a lot of sense, that originally this was meant to be the preface. This was meant to be the first book of Tanya, because the second book of Tanya deals with Emunah. It doesn't deal with Avodas Hashem like the first book does. It deals with what our Emunah is and how we understand Achdus Hashem. And really, the second book of Tanya can be divided up into two parts. There's 12 chapters altogether. Chapters 1 through 7, which deal with our understanding of what Achdus Hashem means vis-a-vis the plethora of creations. And how do if all these creations take up space, then how do we understand that Hashem was exactly as he was pre-creation, post-creation? How do we understand that? Because pre-creation, there was nothing else taking up space. Post-creation, we have a table, chairs, houses, animals, plant life, etc. We have all of the galaxies, all of the physicality that's now taking up space, and yet we say, Ani Hashem Leishanisi, nothing has changed. How do we understand the unity and the Achdus of Hashem, and what does it mean, Hashem Echad, vis-a-vis all of creation? That's chapters 1 through 7. And then chapters 8 through 12 deal with Achdus Hashem, vis-a-vis Hashem's own attributes. How do we understand that Hashem is Achdus B'tachlis Hapshitos, that the ultimate of unity and Achdus, and yet we see Hashem has various midos. So how do those midos interplay with Hashem's unity? So basically 1 through 7 is under our Emunah and our understanding of Achdus Hashem vis-a-vis those things that are outside of Hashem, quote unquote, creation. And then Achdus Hashem, chapters 8 through 12, vis-a-vis the midos that are internal to Hashem, Hashem's own midos. How do we understand Achdus Hashem vis-a-vis that? So that's really if we can encapsulate Sha'ar Hayichud V'Amunah, the second book of Tanya, it really is a in-depth exploration into the unity of Hashem, into what our Emunah really is. It's only when we have that then we can then contemplate and meditate and learn about the various concepts of Hashem, but we can't even begin to do that until we understand what our own Emunah is, what our own understanding of Achdus Hashem is. So that's why there are many people who felt that Sha'ar Hayichud V'Amunah was actually meant to be the preface to the first book of Tanya. Okay, so we that's in a nutshell. So last week we did the very beginning of the first half of the introduction. So it's on page 285 on the bottom. There's 150 on the top. That's we're actually one page past that. We're on page 289 on the bottom. So the introduction starts on page 285, right? Yeah, 285 on the bottom. But let me just give a review of the introduction of the first half of the introduction that we did last week, and then we will complete the introduction today. So the Alter Rebbe began by quoting a pasuk in Mishlei, Chanach lenar al pi darkai. Educate the child. Educate the child according to his capacity to understand, al pi darkai, which means based upon his ability to understand. Which means the teacher doesn't teach at his level of understanding. That'll go right over the head of the students. The students won't benefit from that. Rather, Chanach lenar al pi darkai. Educate the child according to the manner in which he could understand. In other words, lower the capacity, lower the intellect, lower the intellectual ideas so that the child will be able to understand it. Gam ki yaskin, and the pasuk continues, and then when he gets older, lo yasim mimenu, he will not veer from it. He will not depart from those educational ideals, because you've educated him in a manner that he could tangibly relate to. But the Alter Rebbe asked an obvious question. If I'm educating the child al pi darkoi, if I'm educating the child according to his way of understanding, in other words, I'm lowering the 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 what would be the right word? I'm lowering the intensity of the intellectual ideas so that the child could understand. I don't want to say I'm dumbing it down. I don't like to use that language, but I would just say I'm lowering that I'm filtering it so that the child could relate to it. But if that's the case, then it's not emes la'mitoi, right? Because the emes la'mitoi, the way that I understand it, I can't give to the child. It'll be over his head or her head. So I have to lower it al pi darkoi. But if that's the case, then what's the praise ki yaskim when he gets older? We won't depart from it. We want him to depart from it. We want him to be able to ultimately understand the higher level of intellect. So what is exactly is the pasuk saying, and what's the spiritual advantage, or what's any advantage of gam ki yaskim that when he gets older, he won't depart from it? We want him to depart from it. We want him to get to emes la'mitoi. Okay. So the author says, in order to understand this question, the answer to this question, he says we first have to understand the place of Ava and Yira in our own Avodas Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe says there's basically two levels of love. I mean, these can be subdivided into myriad of levels, but there's two levels of Avos Hashem. One level is that the soul innately on its own has the godly soul has a powerful yearning to connect itself back to Hashem. A powerful, automatic in its nature, has a love for Hashem. And it desires to be absorbed back into Hashem's light. And so if we could just refine the coarseness of the physical body and allow that natural element of the soul to express itself, that love will come automatically. But says the Alter Rebbe, that is the love of tzaddikim. There are very few people who could reach that level, where if they just refine themselves, the soul automatically expresses that intense love to Hashem. He says that's the madrega of tzaddikim. He says for the rest of us, how do we reach the second level? The Ava Hashem is the second love. This second love is a love that everybody could obtain. And that is through Kishiyasbain and Hated Ba'umka Deliba. When I meditate on concepts in godliness, on concepts that arouse the love of Hashem. And he gave us some examples, as he gave us back in the chapters of in the 40, 46, 47 of Tanya. He says, in a general sort of meditation is understanding that Hashem is my life force. And just as I love my life, nafshi idisicha, I yearn for my own life. Every healthy person yearns to be alive and does whatever we can to stay alive and fights to be alive. We have an innate natural desire to be alive because we have an innate natural desire of love of being alive. And if that's the case, and I understand that every beat of my heart and every breath in my lungs is Hashem's life force, just by my own nature, I love my life force, that will automatically bring me to loving Hashem. That's the general meditation. Then specifically, the Alter Rebbe said, when I contemplate and meditate all that Hashem has done for me, just like when if a benevolent king comes to an impoverished person who's lying in the garbage heap, and the benevolent king picks him up and cleans him off and brings him into his heichal kodshai, brings him into his inner chambers and bestows upon him tremendous gifts and wealth and takes care of him and shows him such love, automatically that person is going to show tremendous love and feel a burst in tremendous love to the king. So similarly, when I recognize that Hashem came down to Mitzrayim and took us out of Erevas Haaretz, and not just the physical country of Mitzrayim 3,000 years ago, but every Mitzrayim that I find myself in, Hashem ultimately comes and takes me out and has the capacity to take me out and bestow upon me all of that love. And when I think about the times in my life and the blessings in my life that Hashem has bestowed upon me, in addition to the general feeling that I love life, when I think about the specifics, what Hashem has done for me, that will also bring me to this feeling of love. And that every one of us can obtain. So there's two levels of love. The love of tzaddikim that the soul has naturally, that all the tzaddik needs to do is sort of refine the body so that the soul could shine. And then the love that we work for, that's within the reach of every one of us. Okay, that's sort of where we left off in the introduction. We're still answering the question of Chanach Lanar al Pidarka, educate the child according to his way. The Kiyaskin lo Yasim, and when he gets old, he won't depart from it. Well, how does that even make sense? We're still just, I just want to keep the forest through the trees. Just remember, we're still trying to answer that question, and all this is part of answering that question. Okay, so now to continue the introduction inside, and today we'll probably just finish the introduction. We won't start chapter 1 because we don't want to start chapter 1 until we put the word out that we're starting a new section of Tanya. So we'll just finish the introduction today. Okay. So we are on 289. Let's see, right at the very top. Let's say, let's start at the end of what we were saying before. Let's say second line from the top, second to last word, Azai Kamayim upon him. Everybody see that? Second line from the top, second to last word on the line, page 289. So when I think about the blessings that Hashem has bestowed upon me personally in my own personal life, of which all of us, no matter how difficult our lives may be, and the issues that we're facing, all of us clearly have been bestowed incredible blessings by Hashem. And if we focus on those blessings and we think about them, Azai, Kamayim Hapanim, then just as water, just as a mirror reflects the face that is shown to it, when Hashem shows me that love and I contemplate and I think about that love, then I will reflect that back to him. That love will be aroused in anyone who intellectually understands and comprehends the blessings that he's been given. And he deeply thinks about it and meditates on it. But from in the depths of his heart, how many blessings and how much Hashem has given. That will automatically arouse Hashem Ava Aza. That will automatically arouse. And this every one of us can obtain. Even if we don't actually feel the emotion, as the Alter Rebbe taught us in Tanya, that maybe we're so emotionally dull and spiritually dull. And I don't say that as in a derogatory way. I think some of us are just more naturally, spiritually enlightened and in tune. And some of us are just more coarse and more harsh and more spiritually unrefined and dull. And I put myself in that latter category. So I'm not denigrating. This is just who we are. This is, I've said this before, this is an example of my wife and me, because this is so we could show the entire world, whether you're this or whether you're that. As a married couple, we showed the entire world that you could achieve this. I'm still striving to. My wife's the example. Yeah.
Number one, I'm objecting to that deprecation. And number two,
not just Emmis.
No, it's for all.
Yeah.
And then number two, if the point is to change,
yeah,
then if you find yourself a bit dull,
yeah,
isn't there such a thing as studying Tanya and sharpening up?
Oh, absolutely. Like we're not stuck there, but we're not stuck there at all. No, 1,000%. And I don't mean to say that we're stuck there, but some of us are just there. We all start sort of the race of life spiritually in a different place, from a different starting point. Some souls are more spiritually refined, some are at a higher spiritual source, some are at a lesser, etc. But yes, we all have the capacity to grow beyond that, and that's actually the entire point. This is what I'm saying. So even somebody, this is actually exactly what I'm saying, even somebody who is a lower rooted soul and is spiritually unrefined has the capacity, even if they can't emotionally create that feeling of love, at least intellectually, we can all understand what Hashem has done for us, the blessings I have, and just that intellectual perception and understanding of it is enough to invest in my mitzvahs and transform me and change me. That's the idea, yes. That's exactly the whole point I was making. No matter where we are on the spiritual scale, on the spiritual starting line of life, no matter where we may be, we all not only have the capacity, but the obligation to raise ourselves up and to transcend where we begin and to continue to grow. Okay. So this second level of love is what we're finishing off on. When a person is misbeinim b'inyan zeh b'umka d'liba la'oivus Hashem ava aza l'dafka boy b'leiv v'nefesh, this will create within the person, and this applies to all of us, can do this, a tremendous yearning to cling, to connect, to love Hashem with all my heart and soul, as he explained. Now, this is one of the reasons why we think that Tanya may have written before, or Hayichud may have been written before Tanya, because he says, as I will explain, but he did explain this already in Tanya. So that's why we think perhaps Hayichud was initially, see, when Tanya was published in the late 1790, I forgot when the first one, 1792 or 94, 96, one of those years in the 1790s, when Tanya was first published, it was published, Hayichud was the second book. But when it was written by the Alter Rebbe, it was meant to be first, which is why he says, as I will explain, but he did already explain this in Tanya. Yeah.
But maybe also it's in the writing, because if you write a scientific article, often you write all your findings and you get everything down, and you sort of download all of those things you worked on, and then afterward you write the abstract, the intro, and those pieces, because you're going to go back.
Yeah, it could be that's exactly what happened. That makes a lot of sense. So it could be that's the way it happened, and why Hayichud ended up being the second book. But yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so now we're going to take off. Now this is where we left off last week. So vehine. So this level of love that is obtainable by every one of us through our meditative work, meditating on how much I love life, meditating on how God is that life force, meditating on my specific blessings. These are just two. The Alter Rebbe gives us a multitude of different meditations, and through other places in Chassidus, there's even many more meditations. Vehine, inyan avazu. This love is so critical to Avodas Hashem. This love is so important. Ratza Moshe Rabbeinu olav shalom liyita belev kol Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to implant this and empower every single Jew with this level of love. And he actually brings psukim in the Torah, and specifically in Sefer Devarim, where Moshe Rabbeinu is basically his last sermon to Klal Yisrael, is Sefer Devarim. It's the last few weeks of his life and his last sort of words of encouragement to Klal Yisrael. And so in Sefer Devarim, what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? V'ata Yisrael, ma Hashem Elokecha shel me'imcha ki'im le'yira. What does Hashem yearn for you? What does Hashem desire for you? To have yiras Hashem. And then the pasuk continues, also la'oivus Hashem, to love Hashem. And then Moshe Rabbeinu continues, and he actually gives Klal Yisrael what to meditate upon. The pasuk, Hein Lashem Elokecha Shemayim Ushmei Shemayim, that Hashem has the entire universe and all of the great angels and lofty spiritual creations. But what did Hashem desire? He desired you. He desired your avos. He wants the avodah of the Jewish people, that Hashem sets aside all of the Eilam Eselyenim, all of the world of Atzilus, and the world of Bria, and the world of Yitzira, and all of the Malachim, and all of the angels. Hashem sets it aside. Hashem sets it all aside. Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael, Rak ba'avos Hashem desired the avodah of your avos. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says, therefore, spiritually sensitize yourself, circumcise the foreskin of your heart, which is a symbolic sort of spiritual sensitivity. Be spiritually sensitive. And recognize the Shivim Nefesh Gomer, that we came down to Mitzrayim with 70 souls, and we became a nation of millions. And how did that happen? We started off with only 70 and we became millions. This is the Bara, notwithstanding the persecution and the slavery. We became millions. This is because of all the blessings that Hashem has given us. And therefore, and therefore love Hashem with all your heart. It's literally Moshe Rabbeinu spelling out the path of Tanya. for the Jewish people. Meditate on these ideas of all that Hashem has done for you, of all that Hashem has blessed you, and that will bring you to Avos Hashem. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu concluded this particular sermon. And he concluded his words about developing this love with these words, Asher anochi mitzava eschem la'aseisa. This is what Hashem has commanded you to do. Now, that was one of the original questions that we asked last week. How could you command an action when you're commanding a feeling? Right? Hashem commanded us to do la'avos Hashem, to love Hashem. What do you mean to do? I can't walk up to somebody in the street and command them to love me. That a love is a feeling. Love has to be nurtured. It has to be developed. It has to be matured. Love takes time. So how could Hashem command la'aseisa, an action, la'avos Hashem, to love Hashem? And this is the answer. Hashem is commanding us, Hashem's not commanding a feeling. Hashem is commanding an action. Do the action that brings you to Avos Hashem. Do the action. Do the meditative work. Do the contemplative work so that you will come to Avos Hashem. That's the asiyah. That's the action. That's how Hashem commands the ahavta es Hashem elokecha. Hashem is commanding us to love the Lord your God. How? V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela. By placing these words upon your heart, by meditating on these concepts. That's the commandment. That's the action associated with love. Hashem's not commanding the feeling. He's commanding the action that brings us, that arouses that feeling. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing in the end of his life. This is his final sort of sermon to Klal Yisrael, to actually become the Beinim. This is the goal. The altar begins Tanya with. Every one of you can obtain this. So what is this commandment to do? Ava asuya belev. This is an ava that is created in the heart. It's created through our actions. Al yedei habina v'hadas b'devarim hama'erim esa'ava. Through intellectually comprehending and intellectually connecting to the concepts, to the ideas that bring to love. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu commanded them earlier, to love Hashem based upon these actions, taking these actions. And this is what Hashem commanded them before. All of these words that I've commanded you to place upon your heart, to meditate. Is a commandment to meditate. All levavecha, place them upon your heart, i.e. meditate upon them. And that meditation, that meditation will bring us to Ava. And this is Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Shem Echad is a meditation. It's not just something that we say. When I meditate on Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that will automatically bring me to that will bring me to loving Hashem with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might. So, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them the Tanya, or the path of the Tanya. Meditate on these words, and this will bring about the love. This, again, the first love happens to tzaddikim. It's a gift. It's a gift. Certain souls are able to obtain this. Certain lofty souls are able to subdue their physicality, refine their physicality. So just the nature of their soul just expresses itself in that divine love. But that's few and far between. And Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Alter Rebbe, they speak not just to the few and far between. They speak to every single Jew. And so while many of us, and perhaps most of us, cannot reach level number one, this Ava that comes from the nature of our soul, we can all do Ava number two. Through our meditative work, create the, again, some people it's easier, some people it comes more difficult to, but every one of us can obtain this.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the meditation, the thoughts to have during Shema? Just at least even that one.
So Hashem Elokeinu. So Shema Yisrael, Shema doesn't only mean physically here, but just like in English. When I say to somebody, are you hearing me? I don't mean, are you hearing me physically, right? I mean, are you understanding me? So in Hebrew, Shema has that same connotation. It doesn't only mean physical here. It means Shema Yisrael. Understand the following, Jewish people. This is what you're meant to understand. That Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is a compilation of Haya, Heva, V'yeh, past, present, and future, all as one, meaning the transcendent force of God, the force of God that is infinite, the force of God that transcends nature, the force of God, the level of Hashem where past, present, future, he sees it all as one. That's Shem Havaya. And then you have Elokeinu. Elokeinu is the Shem Elokim, which is din, severity, contraction, concealment. So this represents, Elokeinu represents the level of godliness that, so Yud Ke Vav Ke, Hashem represents the level of godliness that transcends the universe. It's infinite, it transcends the universe. Haya, Hayvaviyah, past, present, future, all simultaneous is infinite. That's the level of the infinite. Then you have the godly energy that permeates the universe. That's Shem Elokim. We call it Elokeinu. It's yours. It permeates you. It permeates your existence. And it permeates each level of creation according to its capacity to receive. So the Malachim and Elam Atzilus, Elam Abriya get a high level of generated godliness. The Malachim of Elam Yetzirah get a little bit lower, of Elam Asi get a little bit lower. And then in our physical world, human beings get one level of godliness, the animals get another level of godliness, the plant life gets another level of godliness, the inanimate is permeated with godliness. As we're going to see, this is one of the theses of Sha'ar V'Amuna. Everything has a spark of godliness in it that is constantly vivifying and giving it its life. That all comes from Shem Elokim, the level of Hashem that permeates the universe. Now, you may think that, well, these are two different forces. There's the infinite force and the finite force. Perhaps it's two different creators. No, both Hashem and Elokeinu, both the infinite light and the finite force are Hashem Echad. They're all coming from Hashem Echad. They are all coming from one place, from one force, from one God. There's one creative force in the universe. And then when I recognize that, that means, and this is the deeper sort of connotation of Hashem Echad, because traditionally Hashem Echad is well, there's no other deity. There's just one God, but it's much deeper than that. And we've spoken about this before. It means literally there's no other existence outside of God. I see a table here. Yeah, but this table has no independent existence. This table is completely and totally dependent on the godly life force vivifying it and revivifying it and revivifying it every second, every millisecond of the day. So therefore, nothing, and since everything has that same godly light within it that's constantly creating it and recreating it, there is ultimately nothing that has its own independent existence. Everything is dependent on that godly force. That's Hashem Echad. There's nothing that exists independently outside of God. So that's sort of just the simple meditation on Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that both the infinite and the finite forces of creation are all one. And what does that one mean? It means there's no other existence outside of Hashem. When I contemplate on that, and I think about that, and then when I add in the things that the Alter gave us, Nafshi Visicha, the blessings and all the brachas, etc., that will automatically bring me to V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. Yeah, please.
Recognizing everything Hashem does for us, He gives us all the, the blessings and everything. And through the Zimmer, where we're kind of seeing the entire world, the whole creation, all the different levels, everything, and everybody is kind of giving deference to Hashem and showing Hashem's malchus. So everyone took Shimona. Remember Shimona? She had to be the Tanya here with Shimona.
Not here, but yeah, in her bodies, yeah.
Before I found it that time, she woman in Achabana. I remember one thing, her describing the Psikha de Zimra, how you have all the various levels of creation, and each one is chiming in and adding until you have like a crescendo of the entire universe praising Hashem. And if we think about it like that, like it could also arouse within us like this appreciation for Hashem. And then not only all the creation that we could see, but even the malachim and the higher worlds and everything the highest being, they all give deference to Hashem, but where does Hashem choose to busy himself with? It's with us down here.
Yeah.
Like that's where Hashem is. So the whole, you have so much, the whole universe praising Hashem and loving Hashem, and Hashem kind of bypasses them, so to speak, to focus on us. So that, and then we come to Shema.
So yeah, I mean, you make a very good point that really the entire siddur from Birchas Shachar until after Aleinu is one long meditation. The davening experience is meant to be a meditative experience. Like we daven, we say the words, right? Okay, Yotzi davening, Upgedaven, I daven. But davening is really, that was not really what davening was meant to do or meant to be. Davening is really, praying is really a meditative experience. That is what it's supposed to be. All of the Psukkah de Zimra, exactly what Nechami said, all of the Psukkah de Zimra, huh? Yeah. That's that. Yes, that's exactly right. If you, yes.
3 times. He said that 30 minutes before Shabbat, when all of us are racing around like, why
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I could have done something, and we're running around, and yeah, I still have to do this, I still have to do that. And we're not paying attention. He's told this woman, please, 30 minutes before Shabbat, calm everything down in your bed and your home. And that is 30 minutes.
This is exactly you hit it on the head, Farah, because
he talked about it.
yeah, this is exactly what it is supposed to be. Davening, we're not meant to start our day with davening. We're meant to start our day with meditating and then go into davening. That is why in the Chabad yeshiva system, I've spoken of this before, the day does, in most yeshivas, the day starts with Shachris, not at Chabad. Chabad, the day starts with Limud Chassidus. For an hour and a half, we learn Chassidus, then we go to mikvah, then we daven. Yeah, yes, you must. Yes, you must. You must. You have to say Birchas Torah before that. Yeah. 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 So the Alter Rebbe speaks about this. The in one of these books of Tanya, the fourth book of Tanya, is basically a collection of communal letters from the Alter Rebbe to his Hasidim. And the Alter Rebbe addresses exactly this topic, and he spends multiple letters on this topic of davening and how he is unhappy when he sees, and he goes from shul to shul and he sees that people are just davening quickly and he says, I recognize and realize that during the week people have to go to work and people are busy and they don't have time, but Shabbos we have no excuse. Shabbos we should daven slower. Shabbos, we should meditate before davening. There should be learning. There should be meditation. And so at least once a week, we should do it properly. But yes, that is the ideal. The entire tefillah is meant to be a spiritual ladder that we climb through our meditative work instead of just upzugging, saying the words, which is how we do it. But yeah, it's meant to be a meditative experience. As Nechami said, and each section of davening takes us to the next section. So if we understood, and I always said one day I would like to do this, if I don't have enough knowledge myself to do this, but go through what is the meditation in each section of davening. And then that will help us sort of climb that ladder. So by the time we get to Shema, our the Birchas Kriya Shema, where we speak about all the malachim, we're already soaring very high, as opposed to like when we get to Shema, or I should say when I get to Shema, I'm just saying the words. I'm in the same place as I was, but that's not how ideally it's supposed to be. Okay, so yes, ideally you're exactly correct. Okay, so yeah.
As a woman who doesn't have to daven,
yeah.
Do you think it would be better to daven in shul, where my personal experiences, they go too fast, I never can finish, and if I'm really saying it the way I should be saying it, I can't keep, we're not on the same thing. Is it better for me to daven at home, or better for me to go to yes, a woman? Yeah, that's my question.
What I would say is this: there are certain spiritual qualities of davening with a tzibur that help us unlock sort of the lofty spiritual heights that we are trying to obtain, that we can't get on our own. So there are definitely disadvantages to davening b'tzibur, as you said. They're going at a pace where I'm not able to stay at my own pace. And ideally, the idea would be to daven with the tzibur, because there, when 10 people are davening, when 10 men are davening, the Shechina is in a much closer place. So you're able to access a sort of level of Hashem's ear, if you will, that you can't access otherwise. On the other hand, you can still go at your own pace. Now there's distractions in the shul, whereas when you're home, you're much more focused because you're not distracted. You have to weigh the ups and downs, but there is a definite spiritual advantage to davening b'tzibur. So you have to weigh that.
And sometimes I think it's the kavanah, it's not the rate, because if you just think the rate is fast for me, but then you think, if you don't think of that, but you sort of feel the kavanah in the room, then you tap into something different.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
I'm not always so vocal, but this is something that we were just learning about, that davening with tzibur, that number one, does not always only mean with a minion specifically. Even with tzibur with other women, that what we create, the energy and the precious that we have is also collective. And the point of davening with tzibur, I learned a beautiful thing. The word tzibur, tzaddik, Benoni, Virasha.
Oh, wow.
Tzibur. So we need, when we have everybody all together, not just tzaddik and praying together, not just, Beinanim, which according to Tanya is such a high level, tzatzib, tzibur. We need like mamish everybody down together, because everybody brings their qualities, whatever it is, and collectively together, especially when we start, and we preface in the Nusachari and after the Siddur, we start with we start with, so basically we start with Avos Yisrael. So we're together, we're davening with each other, for each other, and so then with that creates that list from Hashem. It's like almost level of Yitzilut with the Tachana, which we don't normally access ourselves unless only certain times.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
So there's but there are definitely advantages to both. To also davening ourselves, even if we're not davening in shul with the minion at the time they're davening, to daven at the same time, and with the same like-minded Avos Yisrael also elicits whatever it joins us to the tzibur.
Okay, so that we're out of time. So we didn't even get to finish the introduction. So we're still in the introduction. Amir Hashem, there's not going to be sure next week I'll be out of town, but Amir Hashem, 2 weeks from now, we will finish the introduction and then hopefully start chapter 1. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see everybody, Amir Hashem, next week. Thank you, everybody.